Boscawen.
Mr Speaker, I wasn't expecting to take a call at that time, but it looked as though the debate might have been coming to a premature close. So, Mr Speaker, let me start by saying that, unlike the many people who have spoken this evening, who have acknowledged that they are smokers or are reform smokers or have outlined the extent to which they've gone through to give up smoking, and to those who spoke about the loss of family members, I should start from the beginning by saying I have never smoked, I hope I never smoke, and I've never lost family members to tobacco. However, this is a subject on which I have had very strong views for a very long period of time. Roger Douglas said in the first reading debate that there will be some ACT members opposing this bill. Sir, I am the ACT member supporting this bill, and I do so very proudly. But before I explain, and it does make me sad because I wish I could have convinced some more of my colleagues to support this bill. But before I explain why I'm supporting this bill, I would just like to make a few introductory remarks. And let me start by saying, Mr Speaker, it is an absolute privilege to be a Member of Parliament. Every day I come into this chamber, I remind myself how privileged I am to be here and of the people who have elected me to put here. And so the speech I give tonight is a speech that I knew that I'd probably be making at one stage during my career in Parliament, and I do it with a great deal of pride and a great deal of thought. I'd also like to acknowledge two of my colleagues. David Garrett and myself I consider to be very, very lucky. We've come into Parliament and we represent a very small party, but it's a party that doesn't whip its members. We have a confidence and supply agreement with the National Party, and under the terms of that agreement we are committed to supporting various matters for the National Party, and particularly supply and confidence. Beyond that, however, we are entitled to have a free vote, and we've often had a split vote, as we had a split vote this evening. And I'd like to acknowledge the leader of the ACT Party, Rodney Hyde. Rodney Hyde has voted against this bill. Rodney Hyde is a very astute politician. Rodney Hyde opposes tax increases. And I guess if there's been any disappointment about this debate so far, it has been those seeking to score political points by people such as Bill English changing their position. And I am very grateful for Rodney, because he has to go to the media and he has to explain to the media why the ACT Party has a vote, and he's prepared to do that, so I've got the ability and the right to stand up and to make the comments I'm making this evening. The second person I'd like to acknowledge is Sir Roger Douglas. Many people forget that Sir Roger Douglas was a former Labour MP, his father and his brother was a Labour MP, and his grandfather was a Labour MP. Roger Douglas was MP for the electorate of Otara for many years, and I was attracted to the philosophy of Roger Douglas when he first set out, or in fact when I joined the ACT Party in 1995, I was attracted by his vision for the ACT Party, which he's recently restated in his book, No Second-Class Citizens. And I can assure members of the public and parliamentarians, even though it may well be the public perception that the ACT Party is not overly concerned with poor people, it's what motivates Roger, it's what motivates me, it's why I'm in this Parliament, and Roger has a very sincere conviction that increasing the tobacco tax is a tax on the poor. And interesting that Tariana acknowledged that and acknowledged some of the alternative arguments that can be put up. Let's just go back through some of the issues that we've heard tonight. We've heard that 5,000 people approximately die each year as a result of tobacco or tobacco-related causes. Lung cancer and many other diseases. That's 14 people per day. We've heard, Mr Speaker, that someone speaks or smokes rather regularly throughout their life. There is a 1 chance in 2 that they'll die prematurely. 1 chance in 2, and that on average it cuts the life expectancy of an individual by 15 years. 15 years. So rather than living, say, a woman living to the average age of 80, she might die prematurely at 65, and sadly for Mary it's a lot younger. We've also heard that smoking disproportionately affects large numbers of low-income people, large numbers of Maori, and in particular large numbers of Maori women, and worse still, large numbers of young Maori women. I had a friend for dinner last night, and he explained that his stepdaughter goes to a high school in Rotorua, and she is just one of 3 people in her secondary school class who doesn't smoke. Now, I don't know how many are in her secondary school class. I would imagine it's 15, 20, maybe 25 people. But she's just one of 3 people, in fact, it's worse than that, Mr. Speaker. It's 1 in 3 14-year-olds who don't smoke. Why are we discussing this? Well, Mr. Speaker, the blunt reality is tobacco companies kill their customers. It's as simple as that. Tobacco companies kill their customers. And the only way they can survive, Mr. Speaker, is that they get new, young, fresh customers coming in the front door. And I believe this Parliament, this government, needs to take every step that it can take to reduce new, young people coming in the door. And I see Mr. Lees-Galloway nodding this evening, and Mr. Lees-Galloway made the point that this is just one of many things that this government could be doing. This government could have adopted, for example, Mr. Lees-Galloway's private members' bill to put restrictions on the retail display of tobacco. And every day that we have a ballot, I look with interest to see if Mr. Galloway's bill's been drawn, and sadly it hasn't. And I hope that Tariana Turia, who I understand is also looking at this area, will soon have a bill before Parliament that will significantly restrict the retail display or the retail display packaging or the way that the product is put. And, sir, I focus on young people because the reality is that the new customers that come in as the old ones die are not people in their 30s, 40s and 50s or 60s. They're young people. And yes, it is illegal to sell tobacco to children under the age of 16, but does that stop them smoking it? Does that stop this class of 14-year-olds in Rotorua, or all but 3 of them, smoking? No, it doesn't. Mr. Speaker, smoking, to my mind, is an absolute tragedy. It's a waste. It's an absolute waste of human life. Tariana Turia has put the arguments eloquently this evening. I can't possibly repeat them in the way that she has done that. Luckily, I actually haven't had someone in my immediate family die from tobacco. I did, however, have to help my mother nurse my late grandmother, Mona Wheeler, in January and February of 1985. And luckily for my grandmother, her bad turn of health was very severe, it was very sudden, and it lasted only about 6 weeks. I can't imagine anything worse, Mr. Speaker, than having to look after and to nurse a child or a parent month after month as you see the decline in their health. And I acknowledge Tariana Turia talking about how she had to nurse her mother. She actually had to nurse her mother and she saw her decline, and she was brought up by a grandmother, and today she is the last remaining of all of her cousins who live, all of the others who have been taken to tobacco. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to devote the last part of my speech to acknowledge the efforts of the Labor Party and Helen Clark. I stood up at an ACT conference in 2001 to challenge ACT members at that time who were opposing the Labor Party's Smoke-Free Environments Act, and I asked to justify their decision. And one by one those ACT members got up and they justified their decision. And to be fair to them, I thought that the Muriel Newman had a very valid point when she talked about RSAs and talked about people who'd gone off to war and the ability for them to be able to smoke in their RSA rooms. And I thought she had a very valid point, and arguably so with cigarette bars. But I will never forget the first time I met the Right Honourable Helen Clark. It was in 1990. She was a young Minister of Health, and she was asked to justify her decision to make it illegal for cigarette companies, tobacco companies to sponsor sport, when she was prepared to not do the same for liquor companies. And the point that she made there 30 years ago sticks with me today. The reality, Mr. Speaker, and I say this to Mr. Anderson, is you can actually have a glass of wine every night for the rest of your life, and odds are it won't kill you. But if you try smoking a packet of cigarettes every day for the rest of your life, the odds are you've got one chance in terms of it killing you. Mr. Speaker, I vote for this bill with a great deal of pride. I realise that there are many ACT supporters who voted for me who give me this privilege, and for those who don't understand my actions, I apologise, but I'm doing this because I believe it's the right and the best thing to do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.